I'm so happy to see you here after lunch. Everybody is super sleepy. People, please come. I see more and more people enter the hall. We're going to have a very interesting session right now. We're going to have a person giving several words, remarks. I want to call to the stage, and I want you to help me with a big round of applause. Riccardo Puliti. He is a Vice President for Infrastructure at the World Bank, and he is leading some of the most interesting and exciting things that the World Bank is doing, and the World Bank is doing amazing stuff to improve the world, so we owe them a lot. Please, a big round of applause. Riccardo, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think it's one of the very few times the World Bank has been introduced with such enthusiasm. I've been given the difficult job to give you a little bit of a presentation, of a speech following lunch, which is one of the most difficult things that human beings have never understood, the relationship between cognitive capabilities and digestive system. So it's quite difficult. But I would like to say that I'm extremely happy to be here. It's the first time I am here. I'm the infrastructure vice president at the World Bank. So I cover energy, transport, digital, and public-private partnership. And I have to say, for me, coming to visit beautiful Israel has been a great opportunity for me and the World Bank to learn from the very best. And I have to say, I will leave Israel with two important things. On the one hand, I'm more concerned than I was before on what are the risks. And on the other hand, I know that there are wonderful people that they have great skills and are ready to help everybody else. So I think it's a great thing. So let me first of all thank the Tel Aviv University, the Israeli National Cyber Directorate under the Prime Minister's Office, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Finance, for inviting me and the World Bank here today to speak with you. It's really, I think it's a privilege to be here. I'm here to share with you that our work is cut out for us to make cybersecurity to take root and be sustainable in developing countries, and that all of us have, have a role to play, an important role to play. To clarify, I'm not talking about emerging markets with established cyber budgets and growing local sectors. I'm referring to low-income economies where incident response capacities have a long way to go, governments have limited capacity to absorb complex cyber investments, the legal and regulatory framework is still being built or it is just nascent, cybersecurity authorities need to be strengthened and scaled up, and last but not least, local cyber skills need to be developed from scratch. What I learned during my stay in Israel is that nobody of us is safe if we are not all safe. So this is something we have to take really into account. And I'm proud that during my mandate as Vice President, I will try to take care of this as much as possible. The countries that I just mentioned are also experiencing a greater number of cyber-related threats from increasingly sophisticated and brazen attackers. And they are the least prepared to respond. Costa Rica, which is a middle-income country, quite developed, where 29 government agencies have recently been attacked, and which is the first country to call a national state of emergency due to a cyber attack, is a case in point. We think every day about how to ensure that populations and businesses in developing countries can harness the benefits of the digital economy to reduce poverty and close the digital divide, so everyone can benefit from today's tech-enabled world. Cybersecurity for us is a necessary safeguard and risk mitigation tool to protect investments in government networks and services, in critical infrastructure, and in the digital economy as a whole. And if there is something that I learned also in Israel, is that it cannot be a two-phase work in emerging countries, in less developed country, in low-income country. It cannot be digitalization followed by by cybersecurity. It must be done at the same time, and I'm sure that many of you that are more familiar with less developed countries realize how complex it is. So what are we doing about this? We are supporting cybersecurity activities in 64 countries with 200 million in active lending and advisory services. We are scaling it up very, very, very quickly. And we have a growing demand for this service from all governments in all regions. Separately, we are also financing developing countries' data protection activities as part of our lending and technical assistance work, from legislation and regulation to the setup of data protection authorities and the implementation of their work. And here we have a growing demand as well. Why do we have a long road ahead of us? Cybersecurity implementation in developing countries needs to become three things. Number one, agile, to adapt low-capacity implementation environment. Number two, affordable, so that cybersecurity products and services are realistically priced and accessible given available budgets in resource-constrained countries. And number three, sustainable, with a nurtured local workforce and business models that can maintain the cyber reforms over the long term. We can all do more to contribute to this. We call on the private sector and industry to play a pivotal role in creating products and services tailored to developing country contexts by being technologically appropriate, modular, phased, and affordable. We can also contribute to the effort of reducing the cybersecurity skills gap in developing countries. Over 3 million cybersecurity professionals are needed globally. We do realize it is something like of a global emergency from this viewpoint. It is important for the international cybersecurity industry to train and teach young entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs in developing countries through work, by partnering with other firms, subcontracting to local professionals, and offering on-the-job training for promises recruits. To our partner countries who lead in cyber, and many of them are present here, please consider offering scholarship programs to cybersecurity students, especially females, in developing countries who can commit to return to their home countries and use their new skills after graduation. So, in conclusion, in cybersecurity, the weakest links present vulnerability gaps for all of us. And please help us in trying to close these gaps in less developed countries that need all of our help. A big thank you to all of you.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you and for everything that the World Bank is doing. We're going to have a panel discussion now, the title of which is Privacy, Security, and Competition, Finding the Right Balance. I want to call the moderator of this panel to the stage together with the speaker. The moderator is Limor Shmerling Magazanik. She's a managing director, Israeli Tech Policy Institute, and she is a great person to meet. So, Limor and the speakers, the stage is yours.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me and us. So our panel today, this afternoon, is going to be focusing on some things that probably in this crowd need no introduction. Security is probably quite easy to understand and grasp for most of you. Privacy, data protection, something that you've heard about. What does competition have to do with what we're gathered here to discuss in this cybersecurity conference? And competition, or antitrust, as it is also called law, is focusing on protecting interests of consumers, ensuring entrepreneurs have an opportunity to compete, what does that have to do with data? What does that have to do with privacy and security? So we have three leading figures in this space to help us shed some light on these questions. And the first one will be Karolina Mojzesowicz, whose work focuses on data regulation and related data legislation in the European Union. So Karolina, please help us understand a few of the very proactive and innovative even new tools that the European Union has introduced lately into this space.
Thank you very much, Limor. Hello, everybody. Well, I suppose you refer to the Data Market Act, which was just adopted yesterday. Well, the Data Market Act actually does not directly has something to do with privacy. It is much more about addressing some economic concerns which we had in the European Union concerning the leveraging of economic power by big companies of whom the market power stems from the data. And what we wanted to ensure is that the innovation and startup companies would be able to access the markets without being forced to go through the bottleneck of some huge companies, gatekeepers as we call them, in order to access consumers. So,
and these gatekeepers are also called very large entities. Who would those be? Which companies are you looking at when you're thinking about very large entities?
Well, in another piece of legislation, we are legislating a lot now, so a Digital Services Act, we tackle very large online platforms, but indeed they refer in the definition to the gatekeepers as defined and in the Data Market Act. To be very brief and clear about who they are, very big economic operators with, who have a significant impact on the market and are active in several member states. One criterion, very big intermediaries which link a very big group of consumers with very big group of businesses. So this intermediaries, trading platforms via which businesses reach out to the consumers. And we have there a threshold, a benchmark of 45 million users being affected or onboarded on the platform. So it's actually regulation for really those who took advantage, can still take advantage of access to very big amount of data. And the legislation aims at making access to the markets a little bit more contestable,
for them.
More fair.
Fair for them. Okay, thank you very much. So turning to Commissioner Noah Phillips from the U.S. Federal Trade Commission. You've been public with your opinions on these issues and perhaps wish to share with us your perspective on this.
Absolutely, and thank you, Limor, and thanks to all of you for having me here. For situational awareness, for those of you who aren't students of US law, the FTC, on which I sit, has a dual mandate. We enforce antitrust law, competition law, and also consumer protection law, which at least in the US includes both data security and privacy. My view is that the synchrony, the connection between privacy and competition has been really overhyped. I think people make a lot of the notion that if we had more competition, we'd have better privacy. And I don't think that position holds up to a lot of scrutiny. Fundamentally, when it comes to consumer data privacy, what we're looking to do is limit access of third parties to people's data. I don't want you to know about me, or maybe if I allow you to know about me, I don't want her to find out from you. But the thing is, what we know is that data is really important for competition. Right? So we see complaints about what Google is doing with third-party cookies, or what Apple is doing with app tracking transparency. These are complaints about a lack of access to data. We see competition concerns, in particular about very large technology companies, sometimes expressed as they have access to data that I don't. And what all of that means is that data are valuable for competition. Fundamentally, competition law protects the operation of markets. Right? We want the free market to work. But privacy is protecting a different kind of interest. And if we really believed that markets left to themselves would generate the kind of privacy that we all want to see, then we wouldn't have a focus on privacy regulation. The whole point of privacy regulation is because we believe there is a market failure, right? The market is not producing the goods that we want, and so we need the force of law. What I think is critical for people like me, for regulators, for legislators, for law enforcers, is to understand that there are trade-offs here. And when we think about regulation, or we think about law enforcement, or we think about legislation, recognizing that the trade-offs are real is the place we need to start to try to decide where to go.
Thank you for that. And we have Jane Horvath with us, the Chief Privacy Officer of Apple, who's potentially a very large entity. And we would love to hear from you how you see this playing out.
Sure, and thank you for inviting me to present today. I have to agree with Commissioner Phillips that there are trade-offs between competition and privacy, and Apple has focused deeply, and it's deeply in our DNA since the beginning, on protecting privacy. Every product that we is built with 4 principles in mind: data minimization, on-device processing, meaning drive as much sensitive data processing onto the device where it's in the control of the consumer, not actually in Apple's control; transparency and choice, giving meaningful choices, letting people know how their data is processed; and security. And the one thing that we know, and studies have shown, that Apple is able to do more for privacy and security because any third party that wants to get onto the platform has to go through the app review process. Developers have to register in their own name. They have to submit their app for review. They have to agree to the App Store guidelines, which contain privacy protective features. For instance, we have a health app on the iPhone. And if you're an app and you want to call the API for health data, we recognize that you can do a lot of innovative things with that health data, but we also wanted to protect against harmful secondary uses. So the App Store guidelines prohibit you from using health data if you're calling the API for other than health or fitness purposes. That is part of the App Store guidelines. So if we go to a world in which there's no app review, there's no App Store guidelines, and apps are sideloaded or they're third-party app stores, many of these privacy protections will likely go out the window. And from a security standpoint, we've also seen that there's significantly less malware on the iOS platform than on competing platforms that allow sideloading.
Thank you very much. So it seems like we have a double-edged sword here, or maybe Karolina, you can help us see how we can go through when we want to have the best of all worlds. We want to see competition, induce innovation, allow entrepreneurs and startups to enter the market, because we believe that in the long run it will give consumers good service, better products, and overall growth for everyone. But at the same time, and of course the European Union has been a leader in supporting consumer data protection and privacy. So how do we make this work together?
Well, I think if you allow me, Limor, I would like to distinguish between 2 different aspects, and coming back to what Noah said. One aspect is about this leveraging of market power. What happens and what is then targeted by us in the Digital Market Act concerning the data from the competition perspective? what we want to ensure is that, for example, the businesses using the platform can get access to the data subjects, to the individual consumers with whom they are trading. Yeah, so this is one aspect. This is this aspect of pure competition from the point of view of not foreclosing the market, not allowing the platforms to decide the terms of the competition in certain markets. This is also about precluding big operators, gatekeepers, from prohibiting businesses trading via them of engaging with consumers whom they found via the platform aside of the platform. So this is not opening up the privacy. This is very targeted, really surgical addressing of certain issues which concern fairness of the market, access to the market. Another thing is of what we wanted to achieve was the portability, and what we still try to, which was already provided for in the GDPR and now is still beefed up with this super version of portability in the Data Act, is possibility to give the consumers, still the individuals, the power to port the data from one company to another in order to fuel the competition on privacy considerations, so that me as a consumer, I can choose a provider who offers me better consumer protection than another one, and I'm not locked in with the one with whom I already generated, produced the data, introduced the data. So these are two different aspects, and nobody says, nobody speaks in the European Union about opening up the databases and sharing all the data so that everybody can get access to it. I think one should distinguish between these two aspects, and well, I'm very curious what now tell me about it.
Now what Commissioner Phillips will have to say about that.
Sure. So I think it's really interesting to look at portability in context, because that's really an attempt to use regulation to stoke competition. And so in the United States, when we allowed people to take their phone number from one carrier to another, they didn't have to go through the exercise of informing all of their friends, right, that their number had changed, which is a tremendous difficulty to people. But especially in a context where you're talking about more and more data, inevitably, if more people, more firms have access to those data, I think there is a kind of privacy concern that's raised. So I'll give an example. We had this big case with Facebook, where Facebook had said, you can only, allowed you to limit things to your friends, but in fact, third-party apps could get access to data from friends of friends. And the scheme that we came up with to solve this problem included provisions that made it really hard for Facebook to do this in the future. And Alex Stamos, who's a pretty well-regarded security person, quipped that we have to decide which way we want to go here. And in that case, I think we erred on the side of privacy. My point isn't that the two will never align. And I want to live in a world where one of the aspects on which companies compete for users is privacy. But I think the fact is we don't yet live in that world, and we need to be cognizant of the fact that as a practical matter, oftentimes, especially when we're dealing in data competition or competition among companies that build products, sell products based on data, that there will be a trade-off.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Jane, before I would love to hear your comments about this, but also maybe your thoughts as an industry representative. Israel, for example, has 3 separate regulators for consumer protection, privacy protection, and competition. And as opposed to the US having one a commission that is responsible for all 3. Does that make for better or for a lesser alignment of these different regulators?
For me? Okay. I think there's some really encouraging movements about, not only in the US, I think having all 3 under the FTC is very helpful because they can see all sides of the issue. The UK and also in Australia, the e-safety regulator, the competition regulator, and the privacy regulator have formed a consortium and are now working together. And I think in Europe, we'll hopefully see the same thing where the DPAs are working with the competition authorities to minimize the privacy impact. And I just wanted to address the portability issue. That is an area that a lot of the major companies are already working on. We're a member of a consortium to develop portability standards and are working very hard to enable that very thing. And then lastly, I would say Apple is competing on privacy. It's not the reason we've built privacy in, but we have definitely used privacy as a competitive differentiator.
Thank you. So we're nearing the end of our time. So maybe for a closure of the three of you, same question for all of you. What you would have liked to see play out in the next, let's say, 5 years in terms of how do we get there and have both privacy, security, and competition?
Well, there is no privacy without security. I think this we all can agree. Now, we in the European Union are very clear about it that the competition concerns will not be resolved by opening up privacy. But we are very clear about it that when data is generated with the help of the platform, well, let's also, the businesses who generate this data and the users who use the products bought from businesses on the platform decide a little bit more what is done with this data and who profits from it.
So I think I'll start by agreeing with Karolina that it's really hard to imagine a world where people feel protected in their privacy where we don't have adequate data security, which is why Cyber Week and all of you being here is so critical. That is a necessary predicate. It may not be sufficient, but it certainly is a necessary predicate. What I want to see, especially in the US, is a very serious conversation when we talk about privacy, not in 50,000-foot highfalutin terms about human rights. I want to see specifics about what are the problems we're trying to solve and what are the results that we want. And once we have that conversation, we can have a serious conversation about what amount of competition we want to trade off in order to get where we're going on privacy, because I do think we need to make progress on privacy.
And I would like to make sure that the consumer and those of you in the audience are the center of the conversation, and that the consumer does not have to give up something from one of these other. We're seeing tensions across the board, not only with competition, but there are other surveillance issues that are also tensions on privacy. And I would like to see the consumer as the center of every single discussion to make sure the consumer doesn't have to give up something, in particular security, in the interest of one of these other values or laws.
Thank you very much, Karolina Mojzesowicz, Commissioner Noah Phillips, and Jane Horvath, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for this amazing session. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and definitely thank you. Okay, are you ready? We're gonna have another session now. I know it's surprising. We're gonna have a session on information security playing in the major leagues. It's gonna be a fireside chat on cloud security, starts from the data. I wanna call two people to the stage, and we will see if they will catch the chairs before someone will take them. The first person is Asaf Kochan, co-founder and president of Sentra, former commander of 8200 unit. Everybody here knows 8200 unit, right? And Jason Chan, former VP Information Security, Netflix. Guys, the stage is absolutely yours. So if you don't know who
Hi, Jason. Hi, everyone. Great to be here this early afternoon, and thank you for being here with us. So, Jason's a friend. We met about a year ago, and it was kind of a quick click. Jason served as Chief Security Officer of Netflix for almost 10 years. And for those of you who are not aware of that, Netflix is one of the pioneer companies when it comes to cloud. Netflix moved to cloud extremely early, I think fully migrated around 2016, and it's been running its business fully on cloud since then in a massive kind of a petabyte scale, full performance in the cloud. And because of that, Netflix encountered from a very early stage security issues, and it built a robust security culture and security strategy and dealt with it extensively. And Jason was there from the very start, in the beginning, doing it. So in this sense, Jason is not just a great thought leader, a great individual. He's also a thinker and a doer. He's been doing stuff. He's not just thinking about things. He actually encountered serious problems. There are no precedents for moving to the cloud, so you're kind of, as you go, you develop the best practices and you learn as it evolves. So he has profound kind of insight into the future, because it's pretty clear that the cloud is unlocking the potential of data. It's the major platform to unlock potential of data, and the earlier you move there, the more you'll benefit, and it's just a matter of time that the entire kind of universe will get there, different paces. So great having you here with us. Welcome to the land of Fauda. And just beginning, I remember that when we first met, one of your kind of first observations was, I actually remember the quote. You were looking at me and telling me, listen, when it comes to cyber, there's so much mess and so much opportunity. I would like you to take it from here and kind of elaborate about this observation.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Asaf. Yeah. I mean, I think part of that is my own personal observation of where I think we are in the overall journey, and I think there's so many interesting problems to be solved. It's not that we haven't made progress, but if you think about crawling, walking, and running, I think maybe we've just gotten onto our 2 feet. And it's funny, Commissioner Phillips mentioned Alex Stamos in the last panel, and I'll kind of requote him. He had this great quote from a couple years ago. He said, being a CISO today is kind of like being a CFO before accounting was invented. And I think that's really true. I think that encapsulates the challenge, right? We have a sense of where we're going, but we still have a lot of ground to cover.
Great. If you can, in retrospect, being in Netflix, give or share with us the most, I would say, profound 2 or 3 insights about cybersecurity that you kind of gained and took with you after 10 years.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was definitely a great learning experience. I mean, certainly a lot of technical and engineering learnings. I would say probably most useful for other folks in terms of leadership advice or findings. One is just around prioritization, right? So if you think about as an individual, as a CISO, you've got 100 things you could be doing when you wake up in the morning. How do you decide what you're going to do? And really more importantly, collectively, how do you align the organization around the right set of things to protect, the right set of threats to mitigate? Because of course, no one has unlimited resources. We don't have unlimited time. You really have to be able to create focus. And then, beyond prioritization, I would say is, making sure as a security leader, you understand the role of security for your organization. I would say, when I was at Netflix, our mission was to entertain the world, right? Our mission wasn't to not have security incidents, right? Certainly, security and sort of building and operating a trustworthy service is is primary to being able to entertain the world, but it supports and enables. So it doesn't drive the business, rather it sort of responds to it and allows it to be successful.
Now, the cloud. So what's unique about Netflix is that it decided from a very early stage to kind of leap forward and put its future in the hands of the cloud. I think it began with AWS, if I recall. Meeting the cloud and building such a kind of infrastructural layer which has to support such a robust operation such as Netflix. How did it fit? How did you kind of build your security strategy when it came to the cloud? And specifically, if you can elaborate on the cloud as, on the one hand, being able to unlock the data potential, but because there's so much data in the cloud and it's so easy to produce and create data and to move data, and there's so many endpoints touching the cloud, how does the data part fit into the cloud as a kind of a fundamental layer of the operations?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. That was, I would say honestly, because that was really my first sort of thing that I dug into when I started at Netflix, was just how do we think about security in the public cloud? And there was just an explosion. When you think about self-service, to me that's sort of like the key differentiator and the sort of transformative piece of the cloud. You no longer have to sort of ask permission, right? You just kind of go ahead and do it. And it certainly unlocks a ton of velocity and a lot of like concurrent execution, but it sort of can put the security team on its back foot because we're used to being able to sort of observe and sort of control and manage. And really, like my recommendation, and I would say the way we approached it was, if you kind of think like historically, and yeah, it's a little bit of a stereotype, but you can think broadly, security teams are kind of looked at as organizations that kind of slow things down rather than speed things up. And I really encourage security teams to, because when you think about the cloud, one of the things that's transformative is you have all these like many more possibilities to integrate security. So you have a much bigger surface. But getting back to the point of prioritization, you have to sort of choose wisely. But I think if you do choose wisely and you sort of like place your controls correctly, and you mentioned data, if you can get your controls close to the data, you actually have a chance to be the accelerant, right? So you have a chance to not only create a better security story, but also actually improve the relationship that security teams have, I would say with the broader organization and most specifically with technical teams and engineering teams.
In this sense, one more point which I would like you kind of to explore is kind of the constant tension between the people who are responsible for identifying the problems and the security problems and the people who are actually fixing them, the engineers. These kind of two sides of the house which sometimes they don't play together, sometimes there's some, in some organizations, there's deep rivalry between them. As you said, they feel sometimes that the security teams are slowing them down or kind of messing around with their, and in this sense, how did you deal culturally wise with this issue in Netflix?
Yeah, I think that's totally the case. I remember when I started in security, I was, a consultant and doing penetration testing, and you would sort of hand people this 100-page PDF report, and they would have to sort of parse it and figure out what to fix. And nobody likes that because it's such a asymmetry of findings to work that results from it. So, we took the philosophy, rather than having engineers like focus on security, we really took it upon ourselves to think about how can we create an ecosystem that allows engineers to focus on what they were hired to do. And so we thought about things like secure by default and self-service and sort of like opting in to the right way. And we would have these notions of what we would call the paved road. So, if you just kind of, what you want to do is make the right thing easy, make the right thing secure. And generally, developers tend to be a little bit lazy. So if there's an easy way to do it, and especially if it's correct and secure, then they're going to go for it. So thanks, Asaf. So I'm going to kind of turn the tables a little bit and ask you a few questions. So I know you can't get into a ton of detail on your work at 8200, but if you could maybe abstract for the audience any observations that you had in your work that you think that the audience could benefit from.
Yeah, so I'm limited, but in a broader kind of sense, I can identify three kind of areas which I observed from what I call beneath the surface. Kind of, I saw things beneath the surface, and one thing is how big is the attack surface? The attack surface is huge. We spoke about so much mess. There's so much mess. It's generations of technology which kind of align together. Some of these technologies were created 40 years ago. They were not designed to deal with cyber threats, but they're still there, working. And it's a huge challenge to integrate them and to build kind of a security posture on them. The second would be so many kind of vendors interacting together. So, and I can elaborate, but the attack surface is immense. The second thing is there's a huge arbitrage between people who know their stuff when it comes to security and the actual need for people dealing with it in the world. We spoke about privacy, and I totally agree, there's no privacy without security, as an example, but there's so many things that you can't do. You can't run operations and continuity without security. So in this sense, there's a massive lack of workforce who know their stuff, and a lot of people who are extremely unproficient when it comes to. In this sense, it's a huge challenge. And the third area is a deep lack of visibility. There's a deep lack. I personally believe in visibility because I think that when you bring visibility and you have a situational awareness, you kind of start moving from a guess kind of conversation and an intuitive feel to kind of real facts, okay? And if you want to change culture, you have to have visibility. And there's a real deep lack in visibility, and organizations don't really know what they have. They have stuff that they're not aware of. And even when they think they have something, just happens to be that this something is in many other places.
Yeah, no, I think those are great observations. So, based on that, do you recommend organizations take a different approach to sort of managing data and thinking about data breaches and incidents?
Yeah, again, I'm not going to try and frighten. I don't believe in that. I just believe in looking into reality and kind of dealing with it. And I would say that dealing and pushing the visibility part is a key foundational layer for a culture change, for a fertile conversation within an organization, and with the ability to educate a workforce to be more proficient and competent. So it's the visibility part, which I will strongly recommend. And on top of the visibility part, I would emphasize pre-positioning, okay? Pre-positioning and playing the what-if game. Not assuming that you won't be breached, playing the what-if game. Okay, it's gonna happen. What happens now, okay? How do I pre-position myself? And I saw it, and I strongly advocate for that if you pre-position yourself effectively and deal with understanding, creating a visibility layer and building mechanisms to pre-position and understand what happens if, your ability to survive a breach or a malicious attack grows exponentially.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely visibility, sort of preparation for incidents. So just as a last question, based on your experience at 8200, any sort of tips or advice, any final tips or advice that you'd provide for CISOs out there that could be actionable?
Yeah, again, it was the visibility part. I won't elaborate on that. It was clear, I think. The second is not trying to catch everything. You have to develop a differential approach for protection and for securing your organization. And not, at the end of the day, it's about data, and it's about valuable data, and it's about sensitive data. It might be customers' data. It might be intellectual property or organizational data. For governmental agencies, it's sometimes secrets, and so on and so forth. The ability to understand the data and to prioritize the data according to the business impact of it, and making sure the most valuable and sensitive data has the right controls, and you understand that you don't have these pieces of data in many other places without being aware. This would be my first kind of tip for security teams. Expose, build your universe of data, prioritize the data according to the business impact, then start securing the most valuable data instead of trying to kind of build fences and barracks and kind of dealing with infrastructural aspects which are important, but I think it's secondary to being able to find your valuable assets and protect them.
Excellent. Thanks, Asaf. We'll leave it there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for this amazing, amazing panel discussion. Guys, we're going to have an interesting speaker right now. Personally, I'm excited to hear his thoughts. I want to call to the stage Amir Becker. He is Vice President, Incident Response at Sygnia. Sygnia is an amazing company, is a great example of an Israeli company becoming a world leader. Please come to the stage.
Thank you very much, Manny. And thank you, ICRC, for arranging this Cyber Week. It's also great to meet everyone in person finally. I have had the privilege to participate in this event in the past in different capacities, and what I love more than anything is how this growing community comes together from all over the world to share experiences and learn from one another. No need to say to this audience that in the digital age, the cyber domain is constantly changing and becoming a fundamental aspect of our societies and economies. Therefore, it's very important to discuss current trends. We are witnessing a tipping point in the way the internet has developed in the last few decades. Deglobalization processes due to geopolitical tension, and also the slowing of economies together are bringing a change. The change is causing an ongoing fragmentation of some of the building blocks of the basic model of the internet and of cyber as one unified global domain. At the end of the day, it's a global challenge, and we are all in this together. I had the privilege to witness firsthand how nation states are building their cyber capabilities. I saw it happening in our tough neighborhood, as well as on a global scale. I saw the cyber realm constantly changing in much more rapid way than any other phenomena in the history of our societies. For over 25 years, I was part of Unit 8200, and in the last decade, I'm proud to say that I was part of a group that created one of the leading cyber powers in the world. After completing my service, I chose to join Sygnia as the head of Global Incident Response. I combined my deep understanding of the cyber domain together with Sygnia's extensive experience fighting the most sophisticated threat actors. Sygnia's teams, together with many global partners, work shoulder to shoulder with organizations worldwide to build a more resilient and secure digital footprint. At Sygnia, we live and breathe incident response, responding to all types of attacks ranging from nation-states attacks to data breaches, financial crimes, and insider threats. The attack trends we are all aware of are still relevant, and just to name a few of them. So, of course, the supply chain attacks, which is divided to some different types of chain attacks that we are seeing in the last few years. And of course, as just was discussed, the cloud transformation It's continuing trend, and we continue to see a lot of attacks in relation to this situation. And of course, the fact that many attackers using the immaturity caused by the digital transformation race, and its ongoing trend as well. The last 2.5 years, the pandemic years, were a golden age for ransomware threat. Many actors which are taking advantage of the connectivity and the new reality of remote working. It was dominated by more or less the same top-tier threat actor groups. Each one of them is highly effective with a good skill set, but ultimately, their attacks modus operandi is highly predictable and therefore manageable. However, over the last year, things have been changing. We are seeing a shift in the threat landscape. This comes at a time when many governments around the world are taking more aggressive steps to fight back and better defend. For example, the US, after the Colonial Pipeline and JBS attacks last summer, and especially since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. The ongoing crisis in Ukraine emphasizes once again the fragility of the global unified internet and how it's becoming fragmented based on political decisions. We are witnessing a tipping point in the way the internet has developed in the last few decades. The globalization processes due to geopolitical tension and the slowing of economies together are bringing a change. This change is causing an ongoing fragmentation of some of the building blocks of the basic model of the internet and of cyber as unified global domain. These changes have raised fears of Splinternet, in which instead of the signal global internet we have today, we have a number of national or regional networks that don't speak to one another and perhaps even operate using incompatible technologies. The Splinternet, driven by politics rather than technology, is now upon us. The Splinternet, where cyberspace is controlled and regulated by different countries, is no longer just a concept, but now a dangerous reality. This spells the end of the internet as a single global communications technology, and perhaps not only temporarily. The consequences of the Splinternet stretch far beyond the population of these individual countries. As the web becomes more splintered and information more controlled across the globe, we risk our democratic systems, the potential corruption of free markets, and further disinformation campaigns. But even more significant is the shift we see that the cybercrime groups themselves are changing. Not just the types of infrastructure they are targeting, a reorganization of crime groups and shifting power dynamics on several levels. Threat actors and affiliates that used to be close allies are now enemies, forming splinter groups that fight each other, sometimes even in the same compromised networks. We have threat actors that are now more politically motivated, sometimes serving as proxy agents directed by foreign adversaries. We've seen politically motivated attacks in which a ransomware or an attack were just a distraction or a cover-up, or cases where there is no option to recover data, as it was completely wiped rather than encrypted. And as Russia is further pressured due to economic sanctions, we see new groups emerge, groups that care less about maintaining their reputation and more about creating a name for themselves as the new leading powers in the cybercrime scene, making them even less predictable and harder to manage or negotiate with. Finally, we cannot ignore the collapse and instability of the crypto market. Ironically, threat actors themselves are experiencing financial uncertainty, resulting in increasing motivation to breach multiple targets simultaneously, and an increase in supply chain attacks, which is another worrying trend we're seeing out there. All of this accelerates the uncertainty and fog of war as attackers become unpredictable in their motivations. The ongoing cyber challenges enterprises and business deal with are almost endless. But there is a way to build a healthier digital environment to prevent many of the situations we all have to struggle with. Being a CISO or a cyber practitioner during this era is one of the most fascinating roles. But it's not just up to the CISO. The responsibility is much wider. And all C-level and board members are taking an important part in dealing with this emerging situation. It also goes to the culture of security in each organization, and the ability to adapt new processes and the flexibility to change basic assumptions. This is an opportunity to shape our society and to build much more robust and resilient organizations. And it is all about us. Because the cyber domain is a man-made domain, therefore the challenges, but also the ways to solve them, are all based on us. So we do need to change the balance and the asymmetry and what we can do. And we all understand that every organization can be hacked. And there are no 100% bulletproof solutions, no one product or one system that will prevent by itself a cyber attack. But there are many ways to raise the bar and to create more secured environment. It's about technology, but it's not just about technology. It's about creating and building comprehensive frameworks based on many layers, including internal processes, decision-making, resources, and above all, our behavior. Only when we are bringing all of the above together, we can talk about changing the balance between attackers and victims, and between cybercrime gangs and defenders. Incident response is a collaborative effort between all work streams: investigation, remediation, recovery, public relations, legal, negotiation, and many more. Incident response is an art of implementing solutions during a crisis. Based on a vast experience in similar cases and the situation, we need to bring the experts to lead us through. It's not just theory, it's based on a lot of practice and experience. So when attack occurs, it looks like that and can damage the business continuity. But still, we have good news. We control the terrain. We don't know where the attack will come from, and we don't know when, but we do know where it will happen. It will happen in our own networks, in our own digital footprint. And together we can control it. In cyber, most of the uncertainty is about us and the gaps we have in understanding our networks and our digital environment. We can develop a superior understanding of our network and of our security fabric. We can establish strong visibility, and we can mold and shape the terrain against the attackers. When we bring to the table our attacker's perspective, we can together to simulate how attackers will operate against the network. And it all goes back to practice, 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 mainly on two levels. First, with management to educate everyone on leading through a cyber crisis. So when we perform war games, we're looking to recreate tension and dilemmas leadership will face in a ransomware situation. And second, on the technical level, we need to leverage our understanding of the enemy to stress test our security against the threats. Cyber attack, especially a heavyweight attack, is affecting business continuity, and it requires a cross-organization effort. So we need to invest in incident response readiness and invest in understanding how we should work as an organization during a cyber crisis. Cyber attacks are what one can describe as predictable surprises. When a heavyweight attack will hit, it will be a surprise, but a predictable one, and we can prepare. There is a fundamental asymmetry to a breach situation. An attacker has the freedom to operate in a fast and agile way. He chooses the timing and controls the pace until the attack is exposed. And from that moment, we must lead the situation. We need to outpace and outmaneuver the attacker. And to do this, we need to ensure that we have all our ducks in a row before an incident occurs. So the last thing we want to be thinking about in a ransomware situation, for example, is who can negotiate with the threat actor, who are we going to engage for legal counsel, which forensic firm should we reach out to Do we have a relationship with a local law enforcement? But more than that, don't let the first time you bring all these people together be during the incident. This will save valuable time and enable rapid mobilization. At Sygnia, we are very proud to lead globally in this chaotic cyber jungle, protecting and defending our economies and our societies. We are doing that by building global partnerships and worldwide collaboration with partners sharing the same values. And there is a lot of meaning for this mission of protecting and assisting organizations worldwide before, during, and after cyber crisis. Wishing us all good luck in this fight.
Thank you so much, Amir. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Are we okay? Everybody's okay? Yay! We are happy to be here. Yay! Just to see who's here, we asked that in the morning. I want to see what is the division right now. If you are from abroad, please raise your hand. Oh, I think most people are from abroad. If you are from Israel, please raise your hand. Okay, so we have about 50% people from abroad. It is amazing. You wouldn't believe how many people travel to Israel to participate in this event, and I'm very, very excited about that. So thank you so much again for making the efforts and coming to Israel. I think that after 2 years of COVID, where we had one conference online and one semi-conference here, going back to this amazing festival, 40 events during 1 week, so many people from abroad, the best and brightest on the stage. I think this is very, very exciting. So thank you again for coming here. I wanna call the next two people to the stage. They're gonna talk about the role of cybersecurity in digital transformation. I've mentioned it before, the importance of being business enablers and innovation enablers as cybersecurity professionals. So this is a very important session. The role of cybersecurity in digital transformation. I want to call two people to the stage. Bijoy Sagar, Executive Vice President, Chief Information and Digital Transformation Officer, Bayer AG, and Gary B. Harbitson. Yes, oh my God, wow, this is amazing. Yeah, Global Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, Bayer. Guys, the stage is absolutely yours. With this kind of applause, you must be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much. Good afternoon. How is everybody doing? That's good. It's so great to be here, actually looking at real people in a real room. And after 2 years, I'm sure all of us are happy to be sharing a space together. I'm particularly thrilled that I'm in a room with so many talents in the same room, and we need these talents for the purpose of our conversation, and you'll hear that in a minute. I'm Bijoy Sagar, I'm the CID of Bayer. With me is my colleague, Gary Harbinson. He's a CISO. And we work for Bayer. And Bayer has 3 businesses. And it is crop science, which is, we are the largest player in crop science in the world with hundreds of millions of acres in cultivation. We are in pharmaceuticals, and we are in consumer health, where you know brands like aspirin and Claritin. Our purpose is health for all, hunger for none. What does that mean, and what is the context to cybersecurity in the purpose? Food security and life security cannot happen without cybersecurity today. Ultimately, we have come to a digital journey so far where everything is so interconnected that we cannot achieve food security and life security unless we have a highly secure environment. In our world, in life science, the problem is context. So you've already heard about culture, you've heard about technology, you've heard about trust. I want to give you the context in a real life situation, because life science is a highly fragmented world. It is a world where different companies, different technologies, different entities interoperate with no interoperability standards. So we work in a world with no standards, but we have to constantly connect with each other, whether it's data, whether it's human beings, whether it's physical products. Secondly, we have a highly fragmented infrastructure. because for a long time in life science, people did not get the sense of urgency that cybersecurity is a real threat. That's only happening now. As a result, we have some catching up to do as an industry, and this is where I think this meeting and the minds here are really important to us, because we have to solve this together. It is a contact sport, it's a team sport. No company, no industry can win this alone. And finally, IP drives value in our business. There is no way life science can bring forward food security and life security without IP. And we have, obviously, as you can imagine, many entities that threaten that journey. And this is where cybersecurity becomes incredibly important to us. So why Israel and why are we here? Because first of all, I think it's now noticed by the whole world that Israel is pioneering cybersecurity. We are aware of that, you're aware of that, and I think that this is the place to be. So we have decided to actually build a digital hub in Israel to harness the power of all the minds here, the energy, the technology, the startup ecosystem, the universities, so we can solve these problems together. Because food security is a problem for Israel. Food security is a problem for the whole world. And we cannot solve this unless we have everybody pulling in the same direction. And secondly, we really want to build it as an ecosystem. So we are here starting this journey. We are nowhere close to done. And we want everybody's attention and energy so that we can actually build this ecosystem. And we cannot do this without health for all, hunger for none purpose, without everybody pulling together. But I'll tell you one quick story just to bring together what cybersecurity means to some of us, which is not just threat vectors and attacks. It's also, for example, we found in the US alone, many hospitals are compromised because people are using hospitals' compute power to do Bitcoin mining. Now, it's not necessarily a direct attack, but as a result, you're actually denying service for really life-saving procedures. And most hospitals do not even know this is happening. So how do you actually go to all of these different entities where we have not invested enough to help them come through? And that's a journey in front of us. Now, Gary will probably take us through some more of this.
Thank you, Bijoy. And it's a great time to be here during Cyber Week. And as I look at the opportunity in front of us overall as an industry and where we're going with so many companies going through digital transformation, there's a unique opportunity in front of us. As Bijoy said, we're directly tied as security teams, CISOs, startups, everyone working together to bring cybersecurity capabilities forward that can help drive our business and allow our companies to achieve their vision and mission. And for Bayer, that's helping the world solve their health and hunger challenges. You know, I've been in cybersecurity for 26 years, and to see us be at the table and be able to really help drive the business forward is a great thing. I can remember 20 years ago, a stakeholder in a past company telling me every dollar that was invested in cybersecurity was like burning money. So we've come from that all the way to where the businesses see the value and see what we can bring to help us move forward quickly in a digital transformation and in a safe and responsible way. I think we also have a unique opportunity looking at, and whether you call it zero trust or whatever the model is, but the opportunity to shift from more legacy architectures that are mostly perimeter driven to driving more trust into every transaction. So we can improve security overall by doing this, but we also have the opportunity to improve usability for all of our employees. You know, historically, employees have to remember when to start up their VPN client and connect in to authenticate to one application and not the other. It's a different user experience when they're in the office than when they're at home. Going forward in the future, it's the same experience, whether they're working from home, in the office, in a coffee shop, airport, motel, wherever it may be, it's the same user experience. And we can start to build security around using context to make better decisions around access so they have access to the applications and platforms they need when they need it, rather than waiting, having to call, go through access requests and other things. So some of the capabilities that I think help us get there as an industry, and first and foremost, there's still foundational things that we need to do well. We need to make sure we're hardening our environment and have threat and vulnerability management programs. We need to have third-party risk programs and our risk processes, educate our employees. These are all still very important foundational things that need to be in place. But then as we really look at how we transform to be ready for digital transformation, it's how do we build modern identity and access management environments that are built to just not look at credentials, but also use context to make better risk decisions. And they're fully cloud enabled so you can authenticate from anywhere. As we go to the cloud, our platforms and applications are gonna leave on-prem and be residing at, for many companies, various cloud platforms and environments. So we don't want to leave our controls on-prem in a legacy perimeter. We need to get those fully cloud enabled. Move those to the cloud so we can protect our platforms and applications regardless of where they're hosted at, but we can also protect our employees regardless of where they're working from. And really rethinking the architecture of how we deploy controls overall. And thinking about data and the way it moves through the environment. You know, data will find a way to move throughout your ecosystem. Data moves a lot like water. If you develop floodplain, the water doesn't stop flooding there. You've just pushed it somewhere else and it's gonna flood. So the more you try and stop data from moving, the more it's gonna find another way to move. So how do we move the controls closer to the data so that as it's moving through our ecosystem, it is protected and those controls move with it? Becomes more important than ever. We've talked about secure by design for many years. Becomes more important than ever to have secure by design as we go to the cloud and as companies are building more and more digital applications and bringing digital services to customers. Because security teams won't be able to keep up if they own all aspects of cybersecurity. We need to empower the developers and the software engineers to build security in up front. Because the dev teams are now essentially building data centers in the cloud. So we need to make sure they have the tools and capabilities they need to build security in up front. But of course, autonomy always has to be earned. So we need to be able to oversee and make sure that they're doing the right things there. And so that's a shift for security teams to make. Also, as we get into the cloud and a very distributed IT ecosystem, we need to also continuously rethink our cyber defense capabilities. How do we do the right monitoring across the entire IT environment? How do we make sure we have the automation in place to move at the speed of an attacker and be able to respond quickly? So, you know, we're constantly shifting and looking at that. And the last and probably the most important pillar for cybersecurity teams to transform is having a global people strategy and investing in the right talent. As Bijoy said, that's one of the reasons that we're here this week, is we're investing locally and building out a team here, because more and more we have to go where the talent is. And we have to look for talent in different ways and drive innovation. And that requires the right mindsets, the right skills and expertise. So that's probably maybe the most fundamental aspect in all of those pieces we talked about, because without the expertise across the industry, within our company, within other companies, we're not gonna be successful on this journey overall. And so I think to wrap up and close, and I'll hand it back to Bijoy for any closing remarks, it is a great opportunity for the security industry to enable the business, to improve overall user experience, and really to shift and transform, because really no digital transformation is going to be successful without a corresponding cybersecurity transformation. And I think that's the challenge ahead of all of us, and look forward to working with all of you on solving those problems in the future. Bijoy?
So my last point is, digital health is already here. Digital surgery is already here. Digital diagnostics is already here. It's not very evenly distributed. We have all this talent in the room, and digital security is already a fact of life. So my challenge, my opportunity to the room is, join us, because we have to solve this problem together, because there is no security without cybersecurity. There's no food security without cybersecurity. There's no life security without cybersecurity. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The name of the next session is definitely interesting. And to some extent, it is dealing with a problem, one of the biggest problems that I feel that I personally face as a person. It's a rather personal problem, but if the title already touches this problem, I feel that it is a good opportunity to admit in front of everyone that I'm also struggling with that. And the title is You Can Stop Stupid. And I feel that I need to somehow stop myself from being stupid. Yeah. I want to call to the stage Ira Winkler, CISSP, Chief Security Architect, Walmart, author of You Can Stop Stupid and Security Awareness for Dummies. Thank you so much for this brilliant title.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming to the Cyber Week. Thank you.
Let's see. Oh, good. I don't have to press a button. Okay, does anybody mind if I curse? I mean, I don't think so, because Israel is more New York than New York is, so that's a good thing. So I only have 13 minutes to cover a 40-minute presentation, so I'll go through it quickly. So I was once online at a security conference, and there was a buffet line, and I was on the buffet line, and there was a guy in front of me who was your typical administrator type. And the guy, we see this table of stickers, and the stickers said, don't click on shit. And anyway, the guy next to me, he's like, I need a whole bunch of these stickers. I go, really? He's like, yeah, I've got a whole bunch of users that keep clicking on shit. They can't stop clicking on the shit. I'm like, wow, you must give your users a lot of shit to click on. And then he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, how are they clicking on all this shit if you're not giving it to them? They're on your systems, right? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, and they're kind of doing it through your email browser. He goes, yeah. I'm like, well, and by the way, if you're giving them all the shit to click on, why aren't you doing anything to stop it after they click on the shit you know they're gonna click on? And he's like, what do you mean? He knew what I meant, but he didn't have an answer for it. So anyway, kind of think of this, because right now, every time a user clicks on shit, we think, oh, what a stupid user. At the same time, we're giving them all the shit to click on. So who's really the stupid one here? So when I say you can't stop stupid, it's not the user. Sorry, guys, this is kind of for you. Anyway, this is the typical Walmart. I'm Ira, hi. Anyway, let's talk about a whole bunch of stuff there. How many people remember the Twitter hack, which is like ancient history because cybersecurity professionals have the memory of a goldfish? And this occurred way back when, in 2020, like 2 years ago or so. So somewhere around the summer of 2020, Twitter was hacked. All of a sudden, major accounts were putting out a Bitcoin scam. And Twitter was like, they went ahead and they had a really great response. Sorry, Walmart says I'm not supposed to be sarcastic. I can't help it. But anyway, Twitter had a really great response, and they put a junior engineer out to put blog posts out on a blog, ironically not on Twitter, which really gets me to this day. And they kept putting a post out. Well, it was a super sophisticated social engineering attack. It wasn't just social engineering, it was vishing. I'm like, wow, vishing. They're really trying to come up with good attack names. So anyway, they did all these things, and then, you know, everybody was saying super sophisticated attack. They're going to go ahead and put better security awareness and all this. But what was really the thing? It turned out the quote-unquote criminal mastermind was a 17-year-old. And the words 17-year-old and criminal mastermind should not go together. That's just a given. If you, a 17-year-old, can bypass your masterminds in your security program, not a good thing. So anyway, what happened? Yes, there was a lot of social engineering. It determined but here was the key part. It determined the hacker, the quote-unquote security mastermind, basically found out that Twitter kept all their tools in a common shared database type of system, SharePoint, whatever the system was, and they were able to figure out that only a few people, 20% of the entire Twitter population, about 1,000 people, had access to change people's passwords. What a surprise. And then all of a sudden they used that, they conducted vishing to bypass multi-factor authentication. But again, they accessed a tool that thousands of people inside Twitter was able to access, and they were able to change the password on all but one account. that one account was Donald Trump's account. And the reason they could not, and you laugh, but the reason they could not change Donald Trump's account was in 2018, a couple years before, on the way out the door, a German contractor said, screw it, I'm just going to do what I think they should have done years ago and delete Donald Trump's account. So the guy on the way out the door deleted Donald Trump's account, and they put extra protections in for Donald Trump's account, not thinking, what about all those other accounts that are hacked on a regular basis? So anyway, think about that when we talk about criminal masterminds. Then around the same time, how many people remember the ancient history around the same time in 2020 when Cloudflare went down? Not very many people. Cloudflare is one of the major content delivery networks on the world, and they basically are the point of presence when you browse the internet, many major sites, and when they go down, pretty much lots of sites go down with them. And what happened was, at the same time, in a great irony, the CEO of Cloudflare was going on Twitter giving regular updates on what happened. And then at one point, a few hours into it, the CEO comes out and says, we figured out the problem. An engineer made a new entry to a routing table. The entry was wrong, and it took down our network. And somebody tweeted back to the CEO, I'd hate to be that engineer. And much to his credit, the CEO replied back, it wasn't the fault of an engineer. It was a failure of leadership that one entry by one person could take down our whole network. And that's the way we have to look at it. Unfortunately, we don't. So anyway, this is kind of like, in cybersecurity, we are the dumbest people ever. We seem to think we're the only people in the history of mankind that ever had to deal with this thing called human error or human action in any form. And there are many, many professions, and I kind of read outside cybersecurity, and one place I read is safety science. And there used to be old school safety science, which is how we think about it. We're like 50 years ago, if somebody got themselves killed in a factory, the people would say, hey, you know what? Why was that person stupid enough to get themselves killed? That was the essence of safety science. Luckily, we came a little bit further along, but the issue was they always blamed the proximity of the user for the mistake. It was always the proximity, and that word's going to come up a lot more. That was essentially like saying if a canary dies in a coal mine, we just need canaries with gas masks in the coal mine. And hopefully you know the analogy, or else I really dated myself. But anyway, because the purpose of a canary in a coal mine is to die when there's a low level of poison gas, because then people know to get out if the canary dies. Now, you don't want the canary to die of old age in the middle of the coal mine, but still, the purpose is not to keep the canary alive artificially. The problem is the mine itself with poisonous gas, and we have to look at it that way. We look at operational problems, and here's the thing with operational problems. Proximity does not explain why a lot of issues occur. But in cybersecurity, we're like, oh, the user was just unaware. We can't blame the user. We just need more awareness. And think about it this way. If you're saying we can't blame the user, but the problem was the user was unaware, you're blaming the user at the end of the day. So stop doing that. It wasn't the user. It was the system that failed from end to end. And the proximity, the user, is just an example. So for example, if there is a bus driver and the bus driver is driving the bus and a tire falls off the bus, do you blame the bus driver? Well, if the driver drove into, for example, a wall and the tire fell off, yes. But if the tire just fell off because the axle was old, the problem was in the maintenance of the bus, not the driver itself. In medical technology, and this is kind of critical, they look at, after a patient dies during surgery, as an example, they do post-mortem tribunals every so often, and they have the doctor explain everything. And then they say to the doctor, why did you make that decision? And then they say, well, this was the decision. They're like, yeah, that was the right decision. Then they're like, well, why did you get to that point where you made that decision? Then they went back a decision. And safety science stepped in and said, the problem was 100 decisions prior actually led to the inevitable death of the patient. And it wasn't the immediate decision, it was 100 decisions before that that led them down the decision path that actually led to a medical error at that point. And so that revolutionized the medical field and safety science. Now, new school safety science pretty much, and I'm starting to cut into cybersecurity here, new school safety science says that a user is part of the system. And I know people like to make the user the paragon of virtue and everything. That will fail. That's why we are where we are. The user is essentially part of the system. And if a user fails and a user creates loss or creates damage, that is not the failure of the user. That's the failure of the entire system. And the user just is the proximity of the error where that error occurs. And that's how you have to start looking at it. A lot of people would never know, because, well, some people would if they actually took my class, but I'm actually a master scuba diver trainer. Why? I just like scuba diving. I kept taking classes, and eventually I ran out of classes to take. I became a teacher. And what happens is, when you start looking at this, is anybody here like a scuba diver certified? Okay, a few of you. And basically, the entire scuba diving course is how not to get yourself killed. There are a whole bunch of ways. There are infinite ways to get yourself killed. Yet scuba diving is statistically safer than bowling, if you're familiar with bowling here. And what happens is, the reason is because they've gone through how people kill themselves on a systematic step-by-step basis. And they figured out in the course of training, here's what we do. And this, I have this picture here because this is an example of a training class. And in this case, the professor, or the teacher in this case, is here watching a student do a fin pivot, as they call it. And the teacher is supposed to be watching all the students at the same time, because students do stupid stuff. I can promise you, I was once teaching a bunch of people like this, and somebody decided, hey, what's under that, what's under that platform? And there I was, having to go ahead and waste my time. But anyway, I, in this case, and luckily most people, also bring, if you can barely see it, a dive master or assistant instructor with you to watch the people, because you know in the process that there are going to be people who do stupid things while you're training other students. And so this is a case where they build in error safety, error correction, and resilience into the entire practice, because the whole scuba diving industry is based on this. Anyway, I better go quickly, but let's see. So really, what contributes to user error? And in the end of the day, 90% of user error is actually caused by the environment, not the user making a mistake. Not the user being aware, but the environment itself leads to the user creating damage. And that's exactly like giving a user a phishing message in their inbox. Now, what's that 10%? Yes, you have to consider carelessness, ignorance, apathy. You also have to consider malice. I mean, the solution of awareness totally discounts that 3 to 5% of your users are either sociopaths or psychopaths. And these people will do you harm when given the opportunity. And if you think the only thing you have to worry about is lack of awareness, you're going to fail, because you have people who really want to screw you when they get the opportunity to do so. Anyway, another concept is the principle of boom, which is a counterterrorism type of thing. And the point of boom is, when you're a counterterrorism professional, you have to think, okay, boom is the incident itself, but left of boom is what do you do to prevent it? Right of boom is the concept of how do you react to it. In the ideal world, you never have a boom, but the reality is a good counterterrorism professional plans for everything along the way. And adopting this, I have the concept, what I think I created it, I'm not sure, but I start calling user actions user-initiated loss. Because just because a user clicks on a phishing message, it doesn't mean it should ruin your entire network. Frankly, if a user can click on a message and ruin your network sucks. But still, a user only initiates a chain of events. They, for example, don't personally encrypt every bit on a hard drive. They launch a chain of events that launch software that goes ahead and encrypts the hard drive. So your job is essentially to limit the opportunities for users to initiate the loss, and then once a loss has been initiated, expect the initiation of loss and mitigate the damage, proactively, reactively. It's built into your processes. So I created this human security engineering model, which essentially says at a high level, governance surrounds everything. People in the world, in cybersecurity, we think that governance are these sets of policies that sit on a shelf that we only create because auditors show up. But really, governance should tell people how to do things correctly, step by step, with cybersecurity built into it, not bolted on it. And then you have the endpoint, well, you have the infrastructure technology, then you have the endpoint technology, user experience, nudges, awareness, and so on. And then to just quickly show how this fits together, this is what happens for a phishing message to be successful. And this is probably the most important slide to understand, because here you have the user, but everything else around the user is what has to go wrong for a phishing message to create damage. So you have, for example, a malicious party. That party has to compromise a bunch of things on the internet to create a botnet. The botnet then sends messages to a perimeter device. Perimeter devices should have DMARC or other sorts of protection mechanisms on there to filter out the message. Then, assuming it doesn't, then you have a mail server like Secure Email Gateway that should filter out harmful messages and phishing messages. And then if it doesn't, it goes to an email client. The email client then starts creating a user experience which says there's an inbox or a spam box and leads users to make the right decision. But then the user should also have nudges, in other words, things around them that kind of get them to get the right actions and so on. And then that's one thing. Then there should also be awareness, and this is where awareness fits in. But awareness should not be, here's what to be afraid of. Awareness should take policies. The policies should create procedures, in other words, guidelines, specific procedures. Don't say be aware of a hacker and don't click on a phishing message, but how do you tell what is a phishing message, what's the right message, and so on. And then that feeds the awareness, but then a user is still going to click on things. Then that action goes ahead and there should be a warning information, like a warning action, and the warning action should say, hey, what the hell? Do you really want to do something stupid? And then the user says, yeah, I really want to do something stupid. So they click, and then that launches potentially credential compromise, request to leak sensitive information or malware. You go ahead, you have web content filters, DLP. The system should not say, hey, user, you can't just download and install software. And then even if they do, then there should be anti-malware, and that should mitigate the whole thing. Now, the reality is this is more than just a user clicking on shit. Again, if a user can click on shit and ruin your network is the shit. And not in a good way, because sometimes saying the shit is good. But no, this is bad. So anyway, the takeaway, don't try to create canaries in a coal mine. Create a safe coal mine. And I'm doing a book sign immediately after, and I'm already like 5 minutes over time anyway, so thanks.
Thank you so much. One quick question with two quick points, if that's okay. I'm definitely going to go to the signing of the books later. Two things that happen in security that might relate to what you're saying. You know, we had a very similar problem with cars, right? People have the permission to drive cars, and it doesn't matter how many security solutions you put inside those cars, those people still take the car and put them inside walls and kill themselves, right? And the solution there, the only way to solve that was removing the responsibility from the user, putting it back on the manufacturer, and that's autonomous cars, right? The user still get all the experience, but none of the responsibility. And the moment that the responsibility moved to manufacturer, suddenly there is a reason for the manufacturer to invest time and effort in creating security. My question to you is there something like that we can do in the cybersecurity world?
Well, the short answer is hopefully we're already doing that. And sorry, I'll talk to them, not just you. It looks weird if I'm like, but anyway, so to answer the question, security, you know, I don't have time for this, but I always ask people, raise your hand if you're a security professional. You do. Then I say you're all failures, because the definition of security is to be free from risk, and your job is risk management, and you're risk managers. The reality is that you put technology in to reduce the risk that you have, the potential loss, the vulnerabilities that would lead to a potential loss. Now, the reality of the situation is in some cases we're limited by technology. Some limitations are financial because there's no financial incentive. I love the fact that if companies have financial incentive to improve. There's also improvement of technologies. For example, AI, machine learning, those are buzzwords, but there's really mathematical algorithms, and the advancement of these mathematical algorithms and other types of technology will help us proactively stop user actions if we put our focus here. Unfortunately, we're looking at this as a set, and here's the biggest point I didn't make during the presentation. We're treating this like every time a user clicks on something, we treat this with tactics. We treat it with, oh, awareness, okay, oh, anti-malware. We're not treating it with an end-to-end strategy like I'm proposing, where you need to look at it. There's gonna be loss, but how can we most cost-effectively mitigate loss at each of those points along the way, like I showed on that diagram for phishing?
Thank you so much. I feel that this is a discussion I could have had with you for 2 hours. So many interesting insights in your presentation. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, I think I'm doing this book sign at Checkmarks booth or something. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Guys, we're gonna have a very, very interesting fireside chat. Special talk and interview. I want to call to the stage Dr. Dorido, Chief Product Officer, Checkpoint Software Technology. Originally, I want to have a quick chat with you, but I see they already organized the stage, so no worry about that. And then I want to call to the stage, guys, we have a special guest here, Tim Brown, CISO of SolarWinds. Everybody here knows SolarWinds, even before the incident. Thank you so much for taking the time and arriving here. Okay, good luck, guys.
Well, it's exciting. I hope you have a lot of time because I have tons of questions to Tim. And so we could stay the whole day because we are last.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I wanted to start with a little bit of a description for those folks who didn't know the SolarWinds situation or haven't heard it from me. I've talked to thousands. So on December 12, 2020, FireEye gave my CEO a call. CEO of FireEye gave my CEO a call and said, "You've shipped tainted code." And I quickly got a call and then met with Charles, the CTO for Mandiant FireEye. And they had a lot of proof, right? They had decompiled code that obviously was not ours. So normally in these types of events, you need to do proof. You need to understand. You need to do research. In this case, we instantly knew something bad had happened. And this is a Saturday. So Saturday morning, we call everybody that we can. We get on cell phones. We get teams together on, again, this is in the middle of COVID. So we're getting people together remote. We're starting to do research. We're looking for this decompiled code, and we can't find it anywhere. So it's not in any of our repositories. It's not in source. We're searching everywhere. We can't find it. But we can find a skin to the same models that FireEye utilized. By decompiling our products, we figured out that it had been shipped in 3 products that were created between March and June. This is all happening in 2 days. So by the time Sunday night around 2 a.m. came, or I guess that would be Monday morning, we produced our financial report and we said this happened. So what did we know at that time? We knew that it was a pretty sophisticated attack. We knew that it had not attacked our source control system, but somewhere in the build process, this code was inserted. So we knew that. We knew a very high number of the expected, of the customers that could have potentially downloaded a version. That's where that 18,000 number comes from, is it was our super high limit of those to be affected. Now, fast forward, and we know that under 100 customers actually went to a stage 2. But at that point, it was 18,000. It was a big number that we possibly could do. So what happened? First day we kick off, we get our external legal counsel, believe it or not, has a fantastic security and cyber team. So they came in and helped be a quarterback for us. Then we start up about 5 different streams: an engineering stream, an IT stream, a communication stream, a legal team, a law enforcement stream. Each one of them's with a leader. And what DLA's responsibility was acting as quarterback. Because if I had taken on quarterback and really incident response commander in that case, there was no way we could have gotten everything done that we needed to do. So top priority was really, understanding what was going on internally and then getting customers in a protected space. Those were really our 2 priorities. We brought CrowdStrike in. On Saturday, we got the B team. On Sunday, we got the A team. And that kicked off about a 5-month level of investigation. CrowdStrike helped a great deal, but we ended up needing some additional help. So CrowdStrike, fantastic threat hunt guys, can't say enough, but when we came to build systems and build environments, it's just not their level of their area of expertise. So we brought in KPMG's forensics team to search through every source line of code. Then we start the process of investigation. CrowdStrike giving us visibility. We're looking to say, hey, is this an insider? Is this an insider attack? And no sign of an insider through this process. So no sign of an insider, but we investigated probably 20, 30 different people essentially saying, hey, is this person really working for us? Is this person really working for us? So we're going to go take some questions, but essentially what we found out as time went by, the attack was attributed to the Russian SVR by US government. Sophisticated attack. The attack internally for us started with an email compromise, an O365 compromise, where they did reconnaissance, and they did reconnaissance for about, I guess 8 months or so. Then they came in with a test run in October. That test run had one build that we shipped. It had no code in it, but it was simply a return from that compromised function that wasn't there before. Once they saw that that worked, they came back in March with 2,500 lines of code. That code was present in 3 builds between March to June. In June, they left. And in October, they shut down their command and control server. Very sophisticated attack from both sides. From our own internally, very quiet, very methodic, very mission-centric. They were after that purpose. They weren't looking around in many places. They inserted themselves into a transient virtual machine that's part of our build environment. So as we build, we spin up virtual machines to do tasks. That's where they inserted it. That's why we couldn't find them in our source code, because they never attempted to circumvent it, our source control system. So we ended up finding a virtual machine that had crashed during that March to June time frame. So we were able to, what now termed sunspot, we were able to expose that, able to give it to the community. We were able to make sure that everybody else saw that this is a method that people were using. Fast forward a little while later, our investigation ended about 5 months later. We essentially stopped producing new features in code for about 6 months, maybe 7 months, before we got back to new features. What we said is, okay, now to recover from this, we have to be not just good, but really exemplary in what we do. And that goes for build systems, that goes for internal IT, that goes for the security team. So that was really our focus, and then communicating to the world as much as we could. Partners that helped us, CISA, incredible partner, really helped amplify the truth. I was hoping that these folks would still be here, but the governments of the world and the national defenders of countries, they call you, so you can get calls from countries. And they were there to help. They were there to help, really help with the truth. So I'm going to let you turn to questions.
Yeah. Thank you. First, I want to appreciate your time with us. I certainly feel privileged to ask you a lot of questions. But being Israeli, I'm not starting with the schmoozing, but with the hardcore. You've seen thousands of research articles, and you worked hours with customers to recover. And at the end, a question that pops up, were there really simple preventions, simple controls that could have maybe not resist the whole nation-state attack, but made it harder? And a case that comes to my memory is an article in Cyber News that references the usage, that comes after the previous speaker, the usage of a password, SolarWinds 123 in GitHub. So I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So nobody's perfect, right? We'll start off with that. Right, that you have so many moving parts inside of an organization that mistakes are made. This specific, mistake that was made was two-pronged. First off, that password was allowed to be created because it was using a separate identity store than what was, our Active Directory. Second off, someone published that to a public GitHub. Now, what happened responsibly from that same reporter is they reported it to my team. They said, hey, you've got a public repo with a password in it. Instantly, this was probably 8-9 months before the incident, we fixed it, right? And we then did a review of the environment and made sure that the environment was safe. And these things happen. Now, one of the things that happens during an incident is you're not allowed to talk to press. So the company itself is not talking to press very much at all. So when they get information, they're getting it from anyone that they can talk to. So a lot of the articles are based on, based on information that happened before I even got there. So I've been there for 5 years. So this was, somebody that left 6 years ago. Information such as the reporter of the password 123. So they were hunting for somebody to talk to them. And bad news sells better than good news. So it probably took press about 6 months to kind of turn around, right? Press was looking for bad. If you ever want to see all sorts of bad things written about Tim, go to the press during that time. But 6 months in or so, I got an article from CISO magazine which said, unprecedented attack, unprecedented response. And that is a huge win. Did the attack occur? Yes. Could my security have been better? Yes. Was it good enough to stand up to that nation-state adversary? No. Could there have been other things that we could do to protect the environment and make it harder? Absolutely. I was spending about a little over, 110, 120% more than what the industry did on security before the incident. Post-incident, I'm about 3 times, just simply because I want to be exemplary in everything that we do.
Good. So now, because I'm assuming there are some innovators or wish to be innovators in the audience, a question on controls is, did any control, not specifically name of a company, but type of control that you felt that failed you? Or if not, or regardless, what would be some of the things on your wish list from these innovators that would have helped you next time, you or the industry?
Yeah, so a number of things, right? Some of the service providers, I won't name names, right, were critical for us to have them be doing more inspection in their back ends and be able to tell that certain areas of our infrastructure were compromised. So those things helped, would have helped, right? Also, visibility, incredibly important across the environment. They were stealthy, but they did not leave, simply no trail whatsoever, right? So if I had more visibility, I was running a single SOC at that point in time. I run 3 now. So I've got, CrowdStrike in, then I go to SecureWorks, then I go to my own SOC, then I have low and slow for others. But more visibility specifically. I think more in specific areas that I could have looked harder at, like the build environment, and had even more information on the critical services within there that was compromised. We were always run through 3 domains, a development domain, a production domain, and a lab domain. And our dev domain had a lot of flexibility because developers demand flexibility, right? So I think, one of the things we pulled away flexibility, and we've been trying to kind of equal that out and make sure that we still allow jobs to be done, but, we still need to have oversight from a security perspective. So those types of things would have been very useful to have.
Very good. So moving on, I'd like the definition before to left from the boom and right from the boom. So we were a bit left from the boom, now we'll move right from the boom. So how did customers reacted? How did it change your sales process? And how do you really gain trust?
Yeah.
Was there something like a good story about this?
So getting legal comfortable with me talking was first the hard part, right? Should we be quiet? What should we do? How should we go out there and talk about it? But getting out in front of it, owning it to start with, instantly gives you some credibility, right? It would have been silly for me to say that it didn't happen. It would have been silly to say that my security was good enough to stop it, because obviously it wasn't. So why not just own that to begin with? Then you start from a level of credibility. And now, what are you doing, right? How are you going to make this better? How are you improving your infrastructure? How are you looking over visibility to see if they are still here in your environment? All of this happened with email and other teams compromised. We're on different communications methods at the same time. But going to the point of saying, how do we become exemplary in each of these areas? What do we need to do? Communicating to everybody across the world. I talk to most ISACs, I talk to most nations, I talk to most national defenders, and just the personal reach out goes a long way for building back trust. And I still do a call a week, a call every 2 weeks with a customer that's thinking about renewing. And they're saying, well, I really want to know what went on and I want to talk to you about it. So it's still very important from a sales cycle. I offer up myself for everybody. And it's just important you're doing that to build that trust back. And then trust flows. Just like, you convince one big bank in New York to adopt your product, the rest will follow. Same deal with this type of trust. Oh, I understand what they're doing, I'm keeping them on, so you should keep them on too.
Mm-hmm. And so if you have any 3-bullet recommendation for somebody we all hope we would never go through this.
Yeah, absolutely. So we could talk about that for another hour, but there's all different recommendations. At the beginning, just expect it to be very crazy. Don't expect to get any sleep. I lost 30 pounds in about 2 weeks. Expect to work, basically 19-hour days, 20-hour days. And the reason why that is because you're focused on customers during the day. You're doing calls all day. And every word that you write, either on your website or anywhere, needs to get reviewed. We're reviewing with legal starting at 9 o'clock at night, and we're reviewing everything. During the day, we're talking to law enforcement, we're talking to customers, we're talking to everybody. So the only time you can get that done is at night. That's why you end up there until 2 or 3 in the morning. So first 3 weeks are just, horrendous. Christmas was a godsend, because Christmas allowed us to catch up. While the rest of the world took a break, we took Christmas Day off. But the rest of the world kind of slowed down for a week, and that allowed us to take our queue of thousands of customer inquiries down a lot. And most of them were, am I safe? And what should I do? We also put programs in place to help the customers upgrade at our cost. So that also kind of builds trust with the customers. So make sure you're thinking about what's most important. If I had paid attention to every bad article that was going on, everything in the press, I wouldn't have been able to focus on customers, get builds in the right hands of people, communicate to people. So focus, very important, and just kind of move forward from that.
And if you look at the industry going forward and not necessarily what was done today, is there a room to reconsider how we use such tools that are deployed in the kind of curve and essence of our networks and most sensitive places?
Yeah, that as well as one of the things that, if you always look at the chart of where solutions are, kind of the response and the recover section is very empty. There's not many tools kind of right of boom. So there's not many good playbooks, what you should do from right of boom or just potential boom. I had a good incident response program, but an incident response program at this scale really is just unprecedented. It's nothing like my normal, simple, hey, you've got a vulnerability in your product type of incidents. So it's important to be able to have a playbook that really works at that. So testing, making sure that you have your execs ready, making sure that you have legal teams, make sure that you have external legal teams, make sure that you have all of those things in place before something kind of really bad happens. And we talk about them as extinction events. We talk about them in that way. But how do you plan to work through them in a systematic fashion with the right context? What are you going to answer? What are you not going to answer? For us, again, our model was fairly simple. It was the customer, right? Keeping the customer in mind, getting them healthy, because we did not know that the threat actor had shut down their command and control server at that point. We thought they were still,
operational.
Yeah, absolutely.
So because we all want to go home with a smile and not just with fears, is there anything good that came out of this?
Oh, yeah. So one of the things, a lot of good has come out of this, no question. So first off, I help the security budgets of the world, no question whatsoever.
Woo!
And you talk to any CISO, and what they did and what their board did said, can this happen to us? And they said, hell yes, of course it can, right? So absolutely. So what they said, well, what do we need to spend? What do we need to do? So I really do believe that I helped security budgets around the world increase and to have that become a board conversation. I helped with public-private partnership. If you look at the executive order from US, that came out directly because of the incident. One of the things that Ann from Microsoft told me the other day was that it really helped the collaboration among researchers. The amount of research that went on during our incident was unprecedented, right? And it was really good, spot-on research. It was detailed. It was saying, okay, this is not just what the first attack looks like, but this would be what a secondary attack would look like. And these are the models that would be utilized. So a lot of good from a research community communicating. And then a lot of global communications occurred to be able to help us figure out, hey, we really could do better. We really could communicate better. We really could share more information. And sharing doesn't necessarily put you out of business. So that's the other part, right? I'm hoping that people see that, you know, SolarWinds is still very healthy. We're doing fine. We're meeting our numbers. We had a renewal rate in the low 90s prior to the incident. You know, right now it's just creeping up into the 90s again. So high 80s, moving into the 90s. So did it decimate us? Was it an extinction event? No. So did we have to hide from it? No. Was it painful? Absolutely yes, but it really did kind of help set a model we hope that, you know, helps others for the future.
Yeah, and I think for another discussion we could talk more about how could enterprises protect themselves from kind of a supply chain potential attack somewhere.
And the whole supply chain conversation that spurred from this. And, you know, I think the SBOM activity has become more prevalent. And then people are starting to look at the systems and what makes up a supply chain and supply chains for critical infrastructure. And, you know, we absolutely started the supply chain conversation. So one of the things that folks need to remember is we got lucky. Okay? When I say 100 customers were affected, now I can't tell you what the effect of those customers were, and I don't want to diminish that, but I can tell you that, you know, embedded systems like ours, different code, you know, this code required you to connect to the internet. This code required you to connect to unknown command and control servers. So there are safety nets that customers put in place. Just not all of the customers had those in place. Now, that code could have been different. That code could have just done random harm. That code could have been after industrial control system. That code could have done a lot worse. So we really should use this incident as a warning sign and not a singular event and say, this can happen again and it can be worse. So let's prepare for that and really, you know, make the changes necessary so we don't get you know, another event that is worse.
And if you could imagine that any one of the IoT devices that are spread around the network could be such a device, you get a whole proportion of what needs to be done.
Yeah, that's where you get, you know, some serious damage, right? And damage for critical infrastructure and those types of things. So we got lucky with this one. It's a wake-up event for us, and hopefully we all learn and, you know, move forward.
Well, thank you very much. I am really happy to have this discussion with you. I'm sure it was an eye-opener.
Thank you, and thank you for the welcome to Israel.
And I hope you managed to enjoy Israel too.
A little bit.
Thank you very much. We did let you go at the end with not an hour of questions. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful, wonderful session. Thank you. Guys, listen. I want to tell you, I'm going to take 2 minutes of your time and this is it. First of all, let me welcome my good friend, Gili. She is the organizer of this event, Gili and her team. So yes, definitely. Did we have a wonderful day?
Absolutely.
Did you enjoy it?
Very much.
Did you enjoy it? Perfect. Guys, let me tell you something. Tomorrow is going to be amazing, 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 amazing. We're going to have amazing speakers on stage, right?
Exactly.
So we're going to have Benny Gantz,
right?
Minister of Defense of Israel. Who else? We're going to have Cecilia. right?
Exactly.
She is from the story of the Tinder Twingler, right?
Right.
Who else? We're gonna have the deputy manager of 8200, right? 8200. And we're gonna have amazing people. So tomorrow's agenda is unique. Let me remind you, everything is online. Another thing we want to remind you is this one.
The startups event.
Yeah.
It's today.
The agenda is not ending right now. The event here in this room is ending right now, but the agenda is not ending. You can take that out of your badge and you will see that we have a bunch
of events.
Of events right now. I want to focus specifically on the startup exhibition. If you want to look at the future technologies, the next big things in cybersecurity, definitely go to see the startup exhibition.
We have a showcase there, so
where is
I invite you, Porter Building.
Porter Building.
Yeah, it's nearby.
Nearby, yeah, it's like a 2 minutes walk. So Porter Building, go there, see the future solutions of the cybersecurity world. Let me thank you so much for being here. We had such a wonderful time hosting you, right?
Right, exactly.
Exactly. And we're gonna see you all tomorrow. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.